Let me welcome you to the United Nations. It gives me great joy to see all the national costumes and the pride that you have in your heritage, and we welcome you to your home at the United Nations. The United Nations was established after world wars that we've incurred as humanity has suffered, with the two goals of peace and respect for human rights and human dignity. Very soon we realized to achieve peace and human dignity, we needed economic development. Development in all the countries, between countries, within countries. And in the past 20th century, we have made remarkable achievements as a global community as a whole. Not only have we seen a rapid rise in income throughout the world, but most certainly in the Asia-Pacific region, we have seen enormous and far greater than expectation achievements in terms of our social objectives. We have really fought largely to eradicate hunger, and we have done so much to eradicate poverty. In China alone, 300 million people were taken out of the realms of poverty, of living under $1 a day. As we have become richer, as nations, as the world, our poverty line has also increased. Yet we continue to take millions out of poverty. Our social indicators in the 20th century and 18 years into the 21st century has also seen remarkable change. We are living longer, we are living healthier. The average lifespan in Asia Pacific just in 1960 was 53 years old. I should be dead already. Now it exceeds 72. Greater than for females, of course. We have seen fertility rates drop drastically. In Asia Pacific, the average was about 5 child per one woman. Now we are down to about 2.1. We have seen maternal mortality rates halve. We have seen infectious diseases eradicated. Primary school enrollment has increased enormously. In Thailand alone, we have seen secondary school children going to schools now at more than 80%. Illiteracy, which was quite common in the 60s, is now almost a thing of the past. Most of the illiterate still remain that of the older generation. Girls' education has increased. Electrification has increased. In Bhutan, in 1990, that's correct, 1990, 1% of the population had access to electricity. Today, 100% does. So, I'm sure you have heard many times that you are living in the best times of your life, you are living in the best years of your lives. It certainly feels that way in terms of our economic and social achievements. But this has come at a cost. In Asia and the Pacific region, but in the global world as a whole, the great growth of economic growth in terms of income, the great social achievements that we've made has really come at a big expense of our environment. We have seen environmental degradation occur at the expense of economic growth. We have seen societies and communities wanting to develop again at the expense of our land and our seas. In 2015, the United Nations and its member states, all 195 of them, gathered in New York and in Paris to sign 2 historic landmark agreements. The first is the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. Underlying the Sustainable Development Goals is fundamental that economic development alone is insufficient. Sustainable development requires addressing not just the economic, not just the social, but also the environment, and making sure all three pillars are addressed harmoniously and in a balanced manner. That's what sustainable development is about, and that's why it is so difficult to achieve. Understanding the pressures we have on the environment led us to our second landmark agreement, the 2015 Paris Climate Change Agreement. This is a voluntary agreement amongst member states to reduce the amount of carbon emissions, to reduce the temperatures of our planet. So far, it hasn't been doing that well. We've seen temperatures soar in the Northern Hemisphere. We've seen fires occur with greater frequency, and we're seeing natural disasters in the Asia-Pacific region increase in terms of frequency and intensity. The challenges of the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the climate change, is really pointing to the challenges we face as humanity. We here at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for the Asia-Pacific region have done a series of analyses on where we stand in this region on our Sustainable Development Goals. And we find pretty startling findings. What our data is showing is that while Asia-Pacific, and I speak broadly of the world as a whole, has done well in terms of economic growth, has done well in terms of social indicators. Some countries certainly are laggards, some countries could certainly do better, but as a whole, we've done well. We are suffering on three major fronts. The first is inequality. Our societies, our countries are becoming more and more unequal. The rich are getting richer, and the poor are moving up from the poverty level, but not moving up to the ranks of the upper middle income. This is happening within countries as well as between countries. Inequality, as I'm sure you all know, is measured by a Gini coefficient, but we now use another measure of wealth inequality that measures what the top 1% has versus the bottom. Bottom what? And what we're seeing in this region is the top 1% has the equivalent of 50% of the wealth of the bottom. It's a skewed income distribution that is unsustainable. We are seeing this in countries like China and Russia, the bastion of socialism, the bastion of equality, where inequality in those countries are rising rapidly. We are seeing it in countries that are rich, where inequality is increasing, especially Japan, Korea, but most certainly the United States itself. The second area of where we are seeing weaknesses throughout is in the SDG 16, which deals with justice and institutions, the foundations of democracy. We are seeing in the 21st century a rise of hatred, a rise of xenophobia, the chipping away at our democratic institutions, the rise of populism that is creating insularity amongst our people. While we are more connected than ever through the internet, through Facebook and social media, we tend to reinforce our own belief through these mediums, where our fears are supported by like-minded people, and these type of closed beliefs continue to persist, creating democratic institutions is fundamental to achieving human dignity and human rights. It is fundamental to ensuring that governments are accountable to the people, to all of you. And that ensures peace. It is the fundamental tenet of the United Nations itself. So as we see rising inequality throughout the world, we are seeing a slow chipping away at the notions of our democratic human rights beliefs themselves. The third biggest category of challenges we face is clearly in the environment. This is SDG 14, 15, 13, above land, below water. What we are doing to our environment is really in a state where we need to not only slow the growth, the second derivative, growth, growing at a slower rate, we are now faced with a need to reverse the trends that we are going. It is an enormous challenge we face. This is a challenge that you all face as future leaders of the world. While my generation has achieved a great deal under the banner of the MDGs, now under the banner of the SDG, we leave a legacy that is even more difficult: to tackle inequality, to ensure justice for all, and to address the rising challenges of our climate. This requires not just innovation, it requires not just good leadership, it requires a different form of leadership. The challenges we are facing in the world today that you are seeing on your television news are all transboundary in nature. Climate change, disaster does not respect borders drawn by men. We are seeing devastations that occur regardless of borders. The issue of migration really reflects the structural problems of inequality. People in southern hemispheres, 50% of the youth are unemployed. 50%. How do you deal with such a big issue? And they themselves aspire for more. We've seen internal conflicts that result in mass migration. Again, a transboundary issue. And we are in a world that requires more mass migration, especially with the aging of Northeast Asia. Yet, we have greater xenophobia for migrants than we ever had in the past. As these transboundary issues are at the forefront, that is why the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia Pacific presents it as a regional body for member states to get together to talk about, to figure out how to address these issues. But this challenges we face in 2018 that you hopefully will address, hopefully to solve, will require a leadership that talks about cooperation, partnership, and teamwork. These problems are way too big for any individual to solve. It's even too big for any nation to solve. It requires the coordination and cooperation of all. I leave you with an African saying. When you walk alone, you walk fast and you can get to your destination quick. But when you walk together, you walk far and you can handle much more challenges when you walk together. That is a challenge we face in the 21st century. I hope all of you, in your leadership efforts, learn to work together to come up with a common solution for humanity as a whole. Thank you very much.